Hello, I'm Hera Walkholder, licensed mental health counselor.
And I'm William Barney, mental health counselor for the Bougainvilla House. And today we want to talk to you about coping with involuntary isolation and natural disasters.
Yes, during times of struggle and things going on in the world, we tend to get very reactive and panicked. Now, just because we're panicking doesn't necessarily mean we are more prepared for what's to come.
During a time of panic, it's normal for people to have misinformation. So whenever you're going through anything such as a pandemic or a natural disaster, education is probably the best tool that you can have. Know the facts, make sure they're valid, and most importantly, make sure they're also from a reliable source.
Yes, and as things are constantly changing within certain situations, it's normal for us to feel anxious and unsure of what's to come. The other issue, though, is once things are over, we tend to develop feelings of depression and continued anxiety because there's so much that has occurred within a given period of time that it just overwhelms us.
And when we tend to become overwhelmed, you can see feelings of anger, irritability, and isolation, where sometimes we kind of cut ourselves off, especially if we're coming from, let's say, like a pandemic where we have to isolate ourselves because it was voluntary. But once that voluntary isolation is over, that doesn't mean that you should continue to do so.
Whether it's short-term or long-lasting effects, it's really important to provide that care for yourself as well as your family before, during, and after one of these episodes.
During these episodes, if you're during a time where you have to isolate, isolation doesn't mean that there's still no one that you can't talk to. You can always come to people like me and Hera, either in person once the isolation is over, or if during that time, if it's starting to become too much, we have tools such as telehealth, which is an ever-growing technological tool where you can get in contact with us and you can even speak over the phone.
Yes, earlier William was talking about the concerns about misinformation. It's really important that to make sure that you're getting the appropriate valid sources, that you're not going to such places as viraloutbreak.com. You're really taking the time to look into a .gov, a .edu, or a .org source that is going to give you up-to-date and accurate information. And what do we do with this information? Well, when we're interacting with our children and our teens, we need to make sure that the information being provided to them is age appropriate.
You have to keep in mind, guys, that kids and teens, even though they may sometimes act like adults, they're not. They don't always know how to emotionally process some of the things that we're able to. And even during these harmful, or I should say stressful times, even we may not sometimes know how to fully handle things. So before you even speak to your children, make sure that you've engaged in that self-care and you know all of the facts, especially what's going on with you mentally, emotionally, and physically before having a talk with your teens and children.
Yes, absolutely. We recommend a self-check-in. See where you're at, what your concerns are, what your fears are before speaking to your children and your teens, because again, you could bring that to their concerns, which they weren't there to begin with. Really find out where you're at and what your needs are. And it's really good practice for your children and teens. Once they see that you're providing self-care, they're going to also want to follow suit and do the same for themselves.
It's important to make sure you have a plan and to keep open communication always available. You want to be prepared, and you don't want to try to do things at the last minute or try to take things on a go-by-go basis. You never want to react to a situation. You always want to act. And acting means to plan out and then to approach things in a strategic way, not just kind of getting swept up into the pandemonium.
Absolutely. And awareness, education, and kindness are the key areas to focus on during these times of hardship. Because again, when we tend to be overwhelmed and stressed out and panicked, we do usually put that on our neighbor, our friend, our family member, and it just makes things a lot worse than they really need to be at that time when there's already plenty on our plate.
During these times, make sure that you're being the best version of yourself that you can be, so that way you can pass that on to others. If people see that you're calm and you're prepared, they'll try to take note and they'll do the same. And then we can get through some of these trying times.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the different coping skills and strategies that we recommend. For starters, making sure your TV is not running 24/7 on the news. You know, when we have all this information coming at us, it tends to overwhelm us. So setting limits, doing things in moderation is key. Another thing that's important is, especially if you are at home with your family, taking that time to do family discussions, family meetings about how you're feeling, but also taking that time to have a little bit of fun. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to have hope in these times that are trying. You know, playing some board games or, you know, charades or different things that you can utilize to show your kids that, you know what, even through the darkest of times, we're going to make it together as a team.
Yeah, guys, remember, while with the phone, it's easy to get access to many things. And during these times, of course, you want to go to Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. It doesn't necessarily fulfill any of the holes that you may be feeling from some of the anxiety or even some of the depression during some of these times. Communicate with your family and interact with them. Just because we socially have to isolate at a certain point in time during a pandemonium or a pandemic, it doesn't mean that we need to lock ourselves away. Be open, talk, communicate, be open with your family, because it also helps overall in the long run.
And exercise doesn't just take place at a gym. You know, if you're able to go outdoors, that's great. Walk, be in nature, go for a run. But even at home, you can come up with some different techniques that you can still continue to exercise and remain active.
Push-ups, sit-ups, even playing hide and seek with family, things like that where you can stay active. Mind games, things just to keep your mind sharp and to relinquish some of the boredom, because boredom can also lead to some depression as well.
Mm-hmm. Reading, crossword puzzles. The one strategy that you can't do is to not do anything or to quit, to have that feeling of giving up or what's the point. As long as you're doing something proactive rather than reactive, you're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, guys, remember, just stay open, especially with family. Even when you may be feeling those negative feelings, communicate and keep yourself active. Self-care, that's what it's all about.